Hello, my name is Dr. Norman Blumenthal. I'm a psychologist with 25 years experience in crisis, trauma, and bereavement. The Excelsior Care Group has asked me to discuss with you issues relevant to the current coronavirus that we're in the middle of. These are very scary times. There is a distinct danger, and we're taking very extreme precautionary measures, the likes of which I've never seen in my lifetime, and probably most of you haven't seen in your lifetime either. Now, one of the issues that come up with regard to this current crisis is the issue of anxiety. Now, anxiety, as I'm sure you know, is a type of fear, a dread, a worry. And to some extent, anxiety is useful because it's through anxiety that we are careful. Through fear, and again, nominal amount or moderate amounts of fear, are the reasons why we don't generally engage in very dangerous behavior. For example, the first time one of your toddlers may have tried to venture out into a busy street, you probably interacted with that toddler in such a way to make the toddler scared, to make the toddler anxious about doing something dangerous like that. That's life-saving. And that fear the child took with him or her, as we all have, and therefore we're careful about crossing the street. So anxiety can be useful. It depends when, where, and how much. So, for example, before all this happened with the coronavirus, if somebody had pretty regular life, minor concerns here and there, but a pretty routine, manageable life, and they had crippling anxiety, they were constantly afraid, they couldn't sleep at night, they were worried all the time, they would have what we would probably consider an anxiety disorder. That would be considered if you will, like an illness or a disorder that needs to be treated professionally, either through, let's say, psychotherapy or medication. However, times are not ordinary. And right now, a certain amount of anxiety is warranted. As I indicated previously, a certain amount of anxiety is warranted so we can take the necessary precautionary measures. Therefore, we can right now have too little anxiety, or we could even have too much anxiety. We need a medium amount of anxiety. Too little anxiety, not worried enough about the possibility of contracting the COVID-19 virus, will result in reckless and careless behavior, which we have seen sometimes among different people. It'll result in people not taking social distancing seriously. It'll result in people being careless about using protective measures, careless, let's say, about hygiene, about washing one's hands, about not touching one's face. If you're a health worker and you're in a hospital setting, it might be a carelessness with regard to wearing gloves, gowns, masks, all the different types of precautionary measures that are necessary in order to ensure your safety while you're caring for the well-being of others. So you can have too little anxiety. And if somebody in your family, or if you yourself are not worried enough, it actually might mean that you have to try to make them more worried. Let's say if it's one of your children who doesn't take the precautionary measures seriously and is taking undue risks and endangering him or herself or other members of the family, then you might have to impress upon them in a very strong way what the dangers they're taking and make them scared. Tell them about people who are sick, tell them about people who are dying, so that the fear level goes up. On the other hand, you can have too much anxiety, and I think we're seeing much more of that than too little anxiety. People who are now, their fear is disproportionate. Their fear is even greater than the risk that's present, or they're taking all the necessary precautionary measures and they still can't sleep at night, and they still can't eat, and they're still having stomach ailments or whatever, since anxiety is very often expressed through the body. So someone whose fear may be out of proportion to the danger that exists could really have an anxiety disorder, even in the presence of the dangers that are taking place now. Now, who are the people who are more at risk for that? First of all, some people may have had a history of anxiety even before the coronavirus, or may have had a tendency, maybe a family history of anxiety that never came out because nothing scary was happening. And now, as we are living in frightening times, then the anxiety may come to the fore. It's no different than a medical ailment. Some people might have a tendency towards asthma, but if they live in an area where the air is clean, or they've never really, the lungs have never been threatened in any way, then they may not come out. But if they are in a place with a lot of smoke or pollution, then the asthma may come out. Similarly, people may have a tendency towards anxiety, and now that we are all worried about our physical well-being, even our financial well-being, that anxiety may come out. It could be that they had a history. Maybe a history of medical ailments, maybe loved ones with medical ailments, maybe a history of trauma. And even though they may have mastered it and gotten it under control, the scary events that are surrounding us right now might bring it out much more so, or might bring it out even though it has been dormant for many years. So what do you do if you're finding yourself excessively anxious? What happens if you can't sleep at night? What happens if you're beset by worries? What happens if you're getting headaches, stomach aches, skin disorders, all those diseases that are often associated with anxiety? What if you're crying and just can't contain yourself? What are things you can do? Obviously, if it's very extreme, then you have to get professional help. But let's say it's not so extreme. Are there measures, are there healing actions you can take that'll reduce the anxiety? So again, we get that medium level of anxiety where we're worried and we're concerned and we're taking precautionary measures, but it's not overwhelming us. So there are many things that you can do. First of all, very important are outlets. And that's harder today as we are to a large extent quarantined. But to the extent that you can, outlets are very important and very soothing. Perhaps the most so is exercise. I'm sure we all know if we have a good workout in the gym, if we've played ball, if we've danced or something like that, and we're more spent, we're exhausted, we are actually calmer. And it's a known biological fact that physical exertion does have a calming effect on the body, and especially as we're confined and we can't go out and play ball, and we can't necessarily have a run. Maybe we can if we can find some place that's not too populated, but it's much harder. It's important that we find ways to have these kind of physical outlets. Again, we don't have to bench press hundreds of pounds. It could be stretching, it could be a walk, it could be light exercise as well. But getting that heart pumping and having a workout does secrete endorphins in the brain and does have a calming effect. And that should be part of our day. I think we've all seen the videos in hospitals and health facilities where the staff, who of course are the heroes of this event, of this crisis, are stretching, doing exercise, dancing, engaging in these kind of physical activities to reduce the stress and pressure of their job. But there are other outlets as well. An outlet can be music, playing an instrument, listening to music. An outlet can be art, can be reading a good book, not necessarily one that's distressing, but one that's distracting. Video games or watching videos could be a form of relaxation, but you have to be careful because some of the very intense games with a lot of violence, a lot of freneticism, or even some of the movies that are very intense and thrilling, if you will, might, even though while you're watching it, you might be calm, afterwards it can have a residual effect. But video games or videos that are not so intense and that do give you an opportunity to escape, if you will, from the very frightening reality that surrounds us can also have a soothing effect. There are meditative types of activities that can reduce anxiety. Yoga, meditation itself. If culturally and personally applicable, prayer or spiritual pursuits, which allow us to also escape, if you will, the surroundings that we're in, the frightening surroundings that we're in, and give us an opportunity to calm down. But we have to find ways to identify first of all, what works for us, because what might be soothing for one person may not be soothing for another. So whereas for one, let's say an exercise is relaxing, and for another, it might be woodworking. So we all have to know ourselves and know which works for us. The other thing we have to know about ourselves, which is important also in terms of maintaining a calm and not getting overwrought by what's happening, is our bad habits, and we all have them. What we might be inclined to do if to try to calm ourselves down that are not healthy forms of soothing or relaxing. And of course, I'm referring to perhaps alcoholic indulgences, overusing prescription drugs, overeating, these kind of activities that may give us a momentary soothing experience, but in the long run, first of all, it doesn't last. And of course, the medical consequences, the physical consequences of these activities can do us a lot of harm. And again, a lot of this is self-knowledge. A lot of this is being aware of yourself, of your strengths, what works for you that is healthy and helpful, and what you might have indulged in the past, or you might be tempted to indulge in, that will not be healthy. So there's a lot of self-awareness is important. It's important also, by the way, if you're worried and if you're scared and you're finding anxiety is getting too much, just to talk to someone. It's interesting that the mere process of putting your fears into words already make them more manageable. And by the way, this is important not only for the person who's experiencing the anxiety, but for the person who's listening, for the audience, if you will, of somebody who is sharing with them their distress. Because sometimes we feel that because the person's coming to us in a state of anxiety and worry, that we have to give them solutions. If we have solutions and we can make suggestions, that's great. But I'm going to tell you, even from my own experience as a professional, that sometimes just listening and commiserating, that alone can have a soothing effect on the person who's distressed. The study that I'm quoting a lot lately in this situation was a study that was done a number of years ago, in which they took college freshmen and they gave them a few dollars, and they took them to a very steep hill, and they gave them a heavy backpack, and they told them they wanted them to climb the hill. But before they climbed the hill, they should estimate how difficult it is to climb that hill. The only difference was one group climbed the hill alone, and the other one climbed it with a friend. And pretty consistently, those who climbed the hill with a friend rated the hill as less steep or less difficult than those who were climbing it alone. And when someone comes to us with their worries, when somebody comes to us with their anxiety, and we just listen and we commiserate, we're sympathetic to how difficult it is, they're not climbing the hill alone, and the hill doesn't look that big. So we have to remember that for ourselves, that we have to seek out others when the worry gets too much. And at the same time, when somebody comes to us, we don't have to do more than just be an attentive audience to what they're talking about. So again, just to quickly review, anxiety is tricky only because you can have too much, or you can have too little. And especially in times when there's a present danger, we have to have a medium level of anxiety. If we have too little, or somebody around us has too little, we have to increase it. If we have too much, which I think is more common nowadays, we have to try to find ways to reduce it, and we have to reach that medium level of anxiety so we're careful, we take precautions as long as it's necessary, and at the same time we're able to sleep, we're able to engage in recreational activities, enjoy those with whom we can still have contact, and lead the productive lives that we always have. Again, on behalf of the Excelsior Care Group and myself, I hope this information was helpful, and invite anybody, if they have concerns, to reach out, and we see if we can be of any assistance. Thank you.